Recording,
Okay.
right?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, it looks like maybe Abby hit record. Anyway, I think we are recording, so we're good to go.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. We, I think, need to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And is
I'll
there a second? Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion's carried. So I think now turn the meeting over to Alicia, your team, and
Thank you.
go from there. Thanks for joining us.
Oh no, thank you. I know it's been a quick month already since we first kicked off everything. So I just wanted to thank you all for turning around all those documents last week. Abby, we got a lot of the materials from you. And so this week, what we've really been focused, well, what we'd like to do today is update you on sort of four things. One, just talk a little bit about what we've started doing with the program inventory. Secondly, talk a little bit about the process we envision for the stakeholders and that list that you shared. And then third, talk about, get some feedback on the customer journey mapping that we had talked about in the project plan. And then lastly, if time allows, maybe just offer a little bit of an update on the NOB convening. I know, Kendall, you had asked for some more specifics, and we just got the registration list. So we can share a little bit with you about sort of who will be there, and then you can evaluate whether or not it makes sense for you all to send somebody to DC. Does that make sense? Sounds good. Okay. All right. So the first piece is on the inventory document. What we've started to do is take those programs that you identified from 2018 and align them with some of the additional programs that we identified on the web, whether it be ARPA programs or those initiatives that weren't necessarily a State Department line item. And so what we started to do was just add in more detail, looking specifically at what the fund. So we've got a couple of columns. So we've got the program, if there's a name change from 2018 or not, if it's active or not, identifying the funding sources, a brief description, and then the roles, reporting, and coordination notes. So that is what we envisioned updating for you all as part of this project. I think right now there's 72 programs, and I think there's another 20 or 30 that would be added on top of that. It was very, in particular, the 2018 inventory was there were some very specific line items. We could roll some of them up. So, for example, there were multiple training programs within the Department of Corrections, for example. I think currently they're broken out, but we can roll those up. So that is on its way. And getting reconciled and updated. Okay, so our goal is, by doing all that background research, that'll help further refine our line of questioning when we talk to the specific stakeholders. So as we had discussed, oh yes, Senator Clarkson.
Thank you. So I'm just curious, as we talk about what existed in 18,
yeah,
and what as a result of COVID and ARPA exists now. Because so corrections is the thing that triggers my concern, and my question is,
yep,
corrections has inadequate workforce development. That always had high aspirations and has failed on almost every front to provide any serious, consistent workforce development work. But there are some programs and there are work opportunities, and the question is that workforce development? So there are work opportunities within our correction system,
okay.
but the reintroduction of even this little modest thing that we're doing, that we put through in the workforce development bill last year, needs support and needs. So even though it's an ARPA thing, it needs to be an ongoing thing. So there are maybe one-time ARPA money pieces in that workforce in the inventory, but there are some pieces we would want to keep, I think, going forward. I just want to make sure we don't lose those. The ARPA that the ARPA investments aren't necessarily all time limited from some of our point of views.
Okay.
Is that Does that make any sense?
No, totally. And I would love to, if we can just even discuss a little bit, have there been conversations around frameworks for assessing advocacy for sustaining some of those investments? Are you hoping to see some of that as a result of this process?
That is a good question.
Depending on some of the investments, there was requirements for reports on data and outcomes, but I could not say with any confidence that that was required for every single ARPA one-time investment, and I'm using that loosely, across the board that was made. So some programs may come back with information that we can all look at to decide if there should be ongoing programs or adapted in any way or not. Senator, if I could for a second also talk this through with you. We had previously talked about how this work is the high-level governance view and not doing the deep dive into individual programs and how individual programs are working and how we set up a framework to then go through and make those decisions. So that was the place I'm personally operating from, but for discussion.
No, I agree with you, Kendall. I when she mentioned corrections, I just thought, oh, I have to, we can't dismiss. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is high level, and corrections is a deeper dive. But if we're doing an inventory, we want to make sure that the inventory isn't skewed into thinking that some of it's going to disappear. I mean, in some ways, we need the governance to make sure these things continue.
Yeah.
And to coordinate them. Yeah.
Understood. And I appreciate that clarification actually about not getting into the detail, because that was something that when we first looked at that list and looked at the timeline, it was like, getting into the employees and the number of programs and all of that. And I think I'm glad there's what I'm hearing. I just want to make sure. What I'm hearing though is let that go, but focus on just what we can learn about the programs within corrections and how they perhaps interact with other parts of the workforce ecosystem, but we don't need to plumb the granular pieces of those programs.
Correct.
Okay. All right, great. I just want to, I don't want to do all the talking, but I know like Nancy, Mel, Candace, I know a lot of you were looking into the program. We're part of sort of starting to do that initial review of programs. I just want to stop and see if there's any questions or comments or anything like that at this point in time. I would say that we have a document. I wouldn't necessarily share it with you at this point in time. It's very much a work in progress, but I'm going to just stop if there's anything anybody wanted to add or about initial observations or anything like that. Perhaps not. No. Okay. All right. Fab. All right. So not hearing no other conversation, we'll continue to, that's pretty straightforward and that's a lot of documentation. And then I think whatever we don't collect from our landscape analysis, we anticipate gathering information on the stakeholder interview, which is sort of the next piece of what I was hoping to update you all on. So, the document, I think there are about 89 names on that list that you all shared with us in 20 different categories. And so just thinking about timelines again, our first benchmark is April 3rd for delivering an initial analysis of the governance and the composition of the ecosystem for Vermont. And so one of the things for just efficiency's sake that we were like to propose doing is messaging to all those folks and depending upon the role, offering them a couple of ways to engage in the information gathering. One would be scheduling a one-on-one interview. I think for some, like Jay, we want to talk to you and we have a lot to talk about with you. So we're just reaching out to set up time with you. And obviously folks on this committee will, like Abby and others, will want to just talk with you directly. But I think for some of the other people who get a little bit further out into the other circles of engagement, also wanted to offer them this questionnaire, like basic, maybe a couple of questions, nothing too intensive, as another way. Just thinking that logistics and scheduling could slow the process down, and we want to give people a couple of points of entry to engage. And then the last thing we're thinking about is inviting people just to say that if there is a staff meeting or something that you already have scheduled, if there's a way that we can tag on to that, if that's another option to try to create an efficiency. So just wanted to get your feedback on your initial reactions to us potentially gathering feedback through those 3 mechanisms.
I think it sounds fine to me. What I would be interested in is that anyone that you reach out to that you don't hear back from.
Okay.
Especially, even on the outside of state government, the ones especially that happen to get state funding of some sort, and they're not responding. We want to make sure that we're gathering as much information as we can, and we might be able to push on them a little bit.
Yeah. I also really, I think the important, I think it's important for you to chat with the people outside state government, like, let's say, the Vermont Business Roundtable, who runs their workforce program, the name of which has just disappeared from my brain. Remind me what it's
Talent
called.
pipeline, but that's in flux. So.
I'm just clearly, not back in the mode here. So the talent pipeline, I think this is a great opportunity to begin the discussions with people who are working in our workforce development system outside of state government to find out what are some of the barriers and challenges, like the CTE directors, particularly the independent CTE directors, who are, yes, part of AOE, but also slightly independent, like the Scott Farrs of the world. And I think they will really be able to articulate some of the barriers and challenges and coordination pieces we're trying to get at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
I would lean on Kendall maybe for a bit of this, but what was the expectation in the proposal and the final contract around direct one-to-one interviews, and are we staying true to that?
It wasn't specific, if my memory serves me correctly, just it talked about stakeholder engagement, but it didn't necessarily prescribe exactly what stakeholder engagement had to look like in terms of a format. So I think if we wanted to do one-on-ones, I do think those are important, with definitely a subset of the folks. If some of it can be collected through kind of questionnaires, that's fine too. I'd echo what Chair Marcotte said. If there's folks in state government you're reaching out to and you're not hearing back in a timely way, let me know and I can push them a little bit to respond.
I suspect if we're reaching out to folks who are not part of state government, they will be eager to respond, but maybe that's my rose-colored lenses here.
Well, we all sure hope they will be.
Well, we can give you weekly updates on sort of the status of responsiveness, and then you can apply peer pressure or centralized pressure, whichever method you think will get the most results. We'll leave it for you to think about that, but.
Is it maybe possible for us to see a list of who you plan to speak with directly and who you plan to send the survey to? Because then I see Senator Clarkson agreeing, we might be like, oh no, you really need to directly talk with this person. And it may not look obvious, but they might be a big voice in Vermont that we want to make sure has the time.
Yeah, actually, we'll have a whole list with the modality column. So we could just send you that, and then you can just confirm or change as appropriate. That makes sense for sure. That would be great. That'll definitely help us sort and prioritize.
Modality column. That is like,
sorry.
so,
I just meant for our tracking purposes. Sorry, like, are we gonna do interviews or? Sorry.
Okay, got it. The other person, they're just. People come to mind. You'd want to make sure you talk to Ellen Kaler, who runs our Sustainable Jobs Fund.
Okay.
I think she's an important person who's both in and out of state government. I mean, she's not in it, but she's very close to it and is a very clear-eyed observer of our system.
Okay. Anyone else you want to highlight right away that comes to mind in sort of a similar vein?
Adam, Jay?
I mean, just what Allison was saying before about the tech center directors, there's 4 independent, I just held up 3 fingers, but there are 4 independent tech centers. Scott Farr is the director of one in Springfield. Let's see, it's been a little more than a year since I've had to remember all these names, but I have
It's up in Middlebury, the hockey coach.
Yeah. Middlebury Tech Center is a new director.
Bennington.
I don't have a relationship
Hannaford.
with.
I think
Hannaford,
is-
thank
is
you,
looking
and
for.
Bennington.
And Central Vermont Career Center
Yeah.
in Barrie.
And
I
Barry.
think most of the folks, Scott may not be, but and the individual CT centers weren't individually named on the long list that Abby sent over of stakeholder contacts, but I know Ellen was, for example. So maybe again, once they send us, here's who we plan to talk to in person, here's who we plan to talk to in writing, we can then
Yep.
go from
Yeah.
there.
And to add to the recommendations, some of the state college folks may not necessarily be in the system, just because of the newness of, for instance, Pat's position. Vermont State University also has a newly created position. So those individuals may not have been originally identified. I know Pat was.
Pat Moulton.
Remember looking at that. Okay. Yeah, we caught the controversy, speaking of the libraries over the weekend too. That information's making its way down. We saw
I haven't
that.
heard of that. What's that? No.
Moving.
Libraries.
Oh,
What's that? Oh, I think he's pulling our chain.
Sorry.
It's
An interesting dilemma. It's an interesting topic. I'm sure we'll learn more about that and other things as we go through talking to people directly, but okay.
they're already backpedaling.
Just a question, I think, to kind of what Adam was saying about there being new people in new positions, a function of the pandemic and other factors in the labor market. We have lots of new people in new positions. Yes, I'm new in this position, but I'm not new to the system. And so should we give any consideration to that? There might be a position in an organization, but the person doesn't have a lot of insight. So does that rule them out?
I'm not sure we need to talk to them if they have no insight. That is
But
a waste of
Yeah.
time.
Well, but they may be able to pass you on to someone who can help within
Okay.
that organization that would have the answers to the questions. So I think it's still valuable to touch base with them.
Yeah, even that's interesting to see what institutional knowledge gets passed along, or just perception of role and responsibility in place in the network too. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sort of the second to last thing that if that's everything on stakeholders, we'll get after that. We have everything sort of lined up, and we'll send you that. We'll send the team the list probably maybe tomorrow morning. But the other thing is to think about this question of customer journey mapping. And so I have,
Sorry, can you just, I mean, again, that just sounds like a lot of jargon.
yeah, I've got
A journey map. I love maps.
Yep.
I assume that mapping your journey is like where you enter the system, how you get engaged, who's your mentor who takes you through it, how they journey through it to a job.
exactly. Let me show you an example. Is that an option? Can I screen share? Oh yeah, I can. Okay. Here's an example of, whoops, whoa. Okay, can you see the example of a visit to a TANF agency?
It was better when it was bigger.
Oh, let's try that again.
Yeah, that we can't see the whole thing, but that's at least seeable. That's super dinky.
Oh, we don't want dinky. No, what am I doing? Let me try. Let me go back out again. Try that all over again.
Right.
All right.
Zoom.
Stop.
I like the travel of the photograph you just had up.
At the bottom of your PowerPoint on the right, there is a zoom. You've got 390% magnification.
Oh, no wonder. That's very uncomfortable on the eyes. Okay. Here we go. Okay, try again. Take 2 or 3. Okay, here we go. So now you can see where my cursor is.
No.
We can see nothing.
You haven't shared your
Just her
screen
lovely
yet.
face.
Here we go.
There you go.
Yay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
excellent.
So to your point, Senator Clarkson, yes. So this is an example of what we were thinking. We would have indication here of, some key milestones that one would anticipate a customer of the system. And I think what would be an interesting dialogue to have next is how you're defining customer. And we could have a couple of them, but what are their phases of experience? What is that user's experience? What are they doing? How are they feeling? And then documenting, what we would do is the observers would then document some opportunities to have a more efficient customer experience or an improved customer experience. So this is a pretty, not too elaborate. There's only a couple of points, and it's just a customer's visit to the office to receive their TANF benefits. But hopefully this is, a good illustration of what we would hope to do with your customers. So I guess my question to the group, I'll take it down, is, does that align with your expectations? And then A, and then B, would love to talk with you about a couple of profiles that we might either through interview or maybe a focus group identify as priority for your investigation.
I'm
Question-
not,
Can you frame what the sort of the purpose is for this? Like how would this be used and by who?
yeah.
So I think it's helpful in terms of thinking about how to the question of like, how do people enter the system to get their needs met, right? So what's the experience of a job seeker who has a job but would like to explore earning more money? What is the experience of an employer who has an immediate hiring need versus an experience of an industry leader who's looking to collaborate with the workforce system?
So, but
Right.
who's the reader of the document? Is it the individual that is portrayed?
I think the reader of the document would be a piece of the assessment that we would be delivering to this SOCWED.
Understood. Okay.
Okay, so we have people entering at very different points in their lives. So,
Mhm.
I mean, and I think somehow we have to figure out how to make it flexible enough to reflect the 7th and 8th grader who's being got open, where opportunities, like the first thing is like even just being clear on, wow, all these opportunities in career and technical education. And I'm going to try and integrate this, just like we hope we'll be able to do with our education system, integrate it more fully into the sort of Main Street high school education. So there's that point, 7th and 8th grade,
Yep.
first getting excited about it. And how do they get excited about it? And how good a job can we do bringing them through it and integrating them? Then there's the high schooler who may be entering. Then there's the employer who has, opportunities to upskill and to train. There are the 16-year-olds who sadly have dropped out for some failure in our system and in their lives. Then there are the adults who are coming back into work, parents who may have taken time off to parent, who are coming back, who need to boot up and get re-educated, people coming out of prison. I mean, there's just so many different ways you could enter this market.
So maybe so is it that we need to pick a couple profiles, right? We're not going to be able to journey map all of them, but if we
Right.
were to pick, I'm looking to PCG, are you looking for 2 profiles or 3 profiles? Like an employer profile and a individual profile, ideally, to look at how they're interacting with the programs that we currently offer, either internal or external state government. So in my mind, again, for discussion, what if we chose a 30-year-old who is either unemployed or is looking to upskill? And they approach VDOL and are like, I'm underemployed. Let's say I'm underemployed. I want to do more. Help me find a better job or coach me with what training I need to become XYZ to get a better career ladder going for myself. And then I don't have, and then when employer, I'm thinking a little more broadly, maybe some of you can help me narrow this, but I'm an employer and I need 20 employees. And again, I go to ACCD and VDOL and my local RDC, and I say I need 20 people. Help me find 20 people. Maybe that's too high. I'm looking at Adam for maybe a more realistic, or Jay number. I need 10 people. Can you help me find 10 employees? And then, but
And then I would add 2 of those, because those are good, Kendall, I think. But I think we also need to add the high school senior and the college senior. I mean, and how we engage them too, because if we're wanting to keep those high school and college seniors, how do we engage them in programs that are here, that are keeping them here?
So like people on the cusp of an educational jurisdiction transition is how I often think about it, right? Like, what's next? Okay.
I mean, I think really that's what we're all talking about is transitions. Kendall's examples are about a company growing, transitioning to something larger, a 30-year-old transitioning to more gainful employment, high schoolers and college students to employment. And, you know, as we're discussing them, we're talking about kind of a standard path, and let's also add to it a non-standard path. So what if someone goes to higher ability first? What if someone, you know, how do they encounter the system, and what does the system do to get them routed to the right place if there is a right place?
Or a variation on Alicia's example, a SNAP person who would have some education benefits embedded into the SNAP program.
And I think the other, another thing that I would add to the mix would be veterans. If they're leaving the military service, how do we engage with them? We don't have a lot of people exiting the military here, but they do have a certain type of benefits.
Well, we do have a program that VDOL goes to Fort Drum and tries to get retired members of the service that are retiring to try to see if we can get them into Vermont, and number 1, get in the Guard, and number 2, get them employed in Vermont.
One other scenario that we might want is our sort of the frequent flyers who we know are in the system, and the system really, how's the system failing them? Not because they are a frequent flyer. And is there a way in which we can highlight that through this exercise? I don't know if that's the right tool for that.
So Adam, are you thinking of, oh, I'm sorry, Alicia, are you thinking of folks that enter into a program and don't ever finish, don't make any progress?
Maybe do make progress through that program, but 6 months or a year later are back. And just, you know, part of what we hope to learn from this exercise is that a hypothesis? Is there true data behind that or not? Sorry for the squeaking. My puppy is squeaking.
I was going to say, do you have a monkey? Do you have a pet monkey? You do. Banana belt. So, you know, I was thinking maybe a pet monkey in Brattleboro might not be so far off.
Cool. Okay. So
I
hear
to go to his wise sort of umbrella, people who are in transition for whatever reason in their lives, it could be returning after, you know, parenting. I mean, we've identified some of them, but some of them we haven't. Exiting military, returning after parenting, or, you know, after you never stop parenting, but you know what I mean, after they've gone to school. I would add, of course, the alumni out of corrections, and I would add the alumni out of our better recovery programs, people who may actually have managed to kick it and who are really ready to transition. But those are the only other ones I thought about.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know, when we talk about high school students, seniors transitioning, I'm really interested in the ones that are transitioning, not transitioning to go to college.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah.
Right. who may just need that certificate program, or apprenticeship or whatever, clean energy. I mean, my God, we've just passed S5. Huge clean energy workforce opportunities and broadband and internet workforce opportunities. Oh my God.
Yeah, so are these opportunities making their way down at the local level? Got you. Okay.
Yeah. How are we communicating? How are we messaging all this? I know that's not our issue yet, but
yeah.
Well, it's part of this governance structure of how do
Yeah,
we
exactly.
get that message down to the local level? And how are we doing it now? And how can we do it better?
So Mike, just to that point, I was at a meeting yesterday, presumably about healthcare, but it was all these under 30s, all of whom have various challenges, many of whom needed me to be able to just give them a person to call about a job, about getting a job and training, better training and stuff. And I, if I'd had more time, I would have loved to have sent them specifically somewhere, which I know anyway. So it's messaging so that they all should know where to go and how to get help and how to begin the journey. How do you embark on this journey?
Well, just add another layer to this since we're trying to lay it all out here. Advanced CTE, which is a national organization for career technical education, did a study a few years ago that looked at the influencers in a high school setting, that it's a teacher that the student has a relationship with. It's not always a school counselor. And for every student, it was always a family member of import. So someone that they had a close relationship. It doesn't have to be a parent. And so while we're talking about, the governance of the workforce system, we have our partners who are official, and then our unofficial partners are parents and other family members that are advising students. And that's about messaging, that's about availability of information, and it has to do with their perception of opportunities that are available in a region or in the area where a student lives. So we'd like for you to interview every family. Just kidding.
Well, I was thinking, I recall some efforts with your labor market leader, publishing sort of trending opportunities and that document that was, or website and document that were circulated. So we'll add that to the list though of sort of things to see if it's how it's being used, if it's being used, that sort of thing. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Actually, Jay, there were some parents who showed up for those interviews that we had with the consulting firm that's doing the work on the integration of CTE and the integration of the finances of CTE with the rest of education. And there were a couple key parents that were very, very thoughtful who showed up at the Barry one that if we need parents, I think we could identify some.
Good.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so I think just to summarize, so what I hear here is we're gonna go through the list of 90 or however the names of the stakeholders that we have, because I think some of this pathway work will become part and parcel of the interview. And so that now that we have a better sense of the priority pathways that you're interested in, I mean, it's a lot of them, but maybe we probably won't get all of them, but maybe we can get pieces of some of them. Some of, like, for example, the transition phases, we'll get pieces of it through interview and other. We'll get cracking on that. The last thing that I had on our list for today's update was this question around whether or not somebody from Vermont was going to come to Washington, D.C. for the conference. I know Abby and Kendall, you had asked for more information, and we got the registration list. And to be honest, I would say about half, there are a handful of people. It's not the whole landscape of all of the areas that we had discussed in our work plan and in your solicitation around areas that you're interested in speaking with. So I can send you a more refined list, but we have mapped out some folks who we're going to try to connect with, and then some key sessions to attend on behalf of the group. So we're happy to feed that information back to you, and I'll give you an update before the week's out. But it turns out it's not as comprehensive a list as I would have liked in terms of representatives from some of the single states, for example. There's just a couple of them. So just want to get back to you on that. So in terms of updates, I think that's all that we had for today. I guess just in terms of process, I'd just love if there's any feedback on the weekly project plans. I know, thank you, Abby, for the heroic task of getting us scheduled through the rest of the spring. I know scheduling is never easy. So I think that's everything that we have at this point. So open for feedback, either, on process or anything else that's at top of mind for anyone. All right. Well,
Okay.
There must be something.
how are the status reports? If we send you like the weekly status reports, and now we'll start to include in them like who we've reached out to and who we've actually met with, and who, responses and things like that. We can get a little more granular in that.
That sounds good.
Okay.
I have a question on that outreach. Do you plan to speak with the 5 members of the task force individually in your outreach, or no? Either way is fine.
That's a good question.
just
No,
curious.
I think individually would probably be good. Unless, well, do you have a preference? Okay.
Well, maybe Mike and I as legislators could go together, because I think we unless Mike objects.
I'm fine.
But I mean, you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. Or what do
Okay.
we say? That's more better than killing things. We say something else now.
Oh, feeding 2 birds with 1 scone is what Sarah used to say.
Yes, that's right. Feeding. That's right. We got to channel Sarah.
I like that. Okay. All right. Very good. And we know that Mondays are better days for you all. So maybe that's we can hit you on a top at the beginning of the week to get that scheduled.
Yeah. A Monday is good for Mike and moi.
Okay. Very good. Excellent.
Okay. Anything
All right.
else? Okay.
No, it's exciting. If we're not telling you how excited we are, we're very excited.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting, and there's a lot to synthesize. So we're excited.
Yeah, and we're a small state. Just think of what, Anyway, thank you very much. And I think Abby's now got us booked for a bunch of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So April 13th will be our next meeting.
Yep.
That will be in
April
person.
10th.
I think Alicia's coming up.
I am.
Yeah, I think April 10th, not the 13th.
April 10th, I'm sorry.
April
April
10th.
10th.
Okay.
And in
Yeah.
person, I think we'll set it up so that folks can view it virtually, but we are going to have a physical location in the State House.
Yeah.
So I just, in case nobody has remembered this, today, 3 years ago, we all went home from the State House and from our jobs, not to work together in person for another 2 years.
That's right.
Or 2.5. It's amazing. March 13th,
Yeah.
2020, a day that lives on in infamy.
Right.
We hadn't thought about it till you brought it up.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating how much our lives have changed in 3 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all. This was great.
Thank you. Okay. Talk
Okay.
soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Okay.